Hi there everyone, this is Dan Dix here reporting for Press for Truth. And today I wanted to talk about what's going on with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Now, despite a call for a ceasefire from the United Nations, both sides of this conflict are continuing to fire at each other. Just last week, Israel had briefly deployed up to 4,000 troops. Now in this video, I don't want to get into the history of the conflict. That would literally take me all day. But what I wanted to address today is the sheer hypocrisy of the globalist media, and especially that of Prime Minister Stephen Harper. Harper released an official statement today that just highlights this neocon ideology that Israel can do no wrong and that they are merely defending themselves against the Hamas terrorists. Harper writes, "The indiscriminate rocket attacks from Gaza on Israel are terrorist acts, for which there is no justification. It is evident that Hamas is deliberately using human shields to further terror in the region." Well, actually, no, it's not evident. In fact, all of my sources for this human shield propaganda come right back to this very statement by Stephen Harper. And furthermore, this recent outbreak of violence actually started on June 12th when Israel launched a campaign called Operation Brother's Keeper. Now, Western propaganda says that this all started with the kidnapping and murder of 3 Israeli youths. This is just simply not true. On May 20th, the Israeli government murdered 2 unarmed Palestinian teens and wounded a 3rd. One of these murders is actually being caught on video. Now, since then, the Israeli state has ruthlessly bombed the Gaza Strip, killing hundreds of Palestinians and arresting hundreds more. They've invaded 1,300 Palestinian sites, including 3 universities. And as documented by Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, and many others, Israel intentionally targets and murders civilians, including children. The Israeli state is using the best weapons that money can buy straight off of the production lines of the military-industrial complex. Meanwhile, the Palestinians are launching homemade rockets. And the most damage that these garage-built bombs have done is when one of them landed on a gas station, causing a significant explosion. But continuing with Harper's statements, "Failure by the international community to condemn these reprehensible actions would encourage these terrorists to continue their appalling actions. Canada calls on its allies and partners to recognize that these terrorist acts are unacceptable and that solidarity with Israel is the best way of stopping the conflict." Harper is evidently angry that the UN isn't supporting Israel in this particular case. Now, I'm not sure what Harper means exactly by solidarity. Perhaps he's talking about the Israelis that climbed up a hilltop to watch the bombs murder Palestinians as if they were watching some sort of fireworks display. As you can see from these pictures, they applaud like as if they're watching the World Cup instead of witnessing mass murder. Harper continues, "Canada is unequivocally behind Israel. We support its right to defend itself, by itself, against these terrorist attacks, and urge Hamas to immediately cease their indiscriminate attacks on innocent Israeli civilians." Now, I don't want to make it sound like I'm some sort of Hamas supporter. I'm not taking any sides, as this is a war between elites where innocent people get caught up in. But Harper's ideological blindfold is physically repulsive. Israeli forces have murdered families and children on the Gaza Strip. Perhaps in the old days of the dinosaur media, it would have been easy to spin this story. But with the internet these days, this kind of propaganda just simply doesn't hold any water. Sites like Twitter have done more for the truth than any coverage by the CBC or any other dying conglomerate. With the internet, anyone can look up the photos of dead Palestinian children. Anyone can read the testimony of men such as 75-year-old Mohammed Hamad. 6 members of his family were killed when Israel bombed the home of his 30-year-old son. Now, the defense for Children International Palestine reported on the story of two teens, Solomon Salim Musa al-Astat and Musa Muhammad Tahir al-Astat. They were killed after being hit by an Israeli missile while they were watching the World Cup with their friends. An Israeli aircraft had bombed a crowd of people who were watching the soccer game. The Israeli state is claiming that they are bombing the homes of Palestinian militants. But even this violates the rules of war set out by the Geneva Convention. So even by Stephen Harper's own standards, the Israeli military are engaging in acts of terrorism. Now, obviously, Harper's conservatives are going to be taking this neocon war hawk stance. But how have the so-called mainstream media held up to all this? Well, so far I haven't seen anything from the major media outlets that cover Israelis' war crimes. Not even the violation of the Geneva Convention. You know, you'd think that at least one reporter might pick up on that. Michael Higgins in the National Post has a disturbing article with the headline, "Hamas probably weak enough to eradicate, but whoever takes their place will likely be worse," with the premise that bombing the crap out of the Gaza Strip and murdering innocent people is okay. Now, the only problem is that the people who replace Hamas may be worse. And, of course, they will be worse. Just think of the survivors of this conflict, especially the children. All Israel is doing is ensuring that the next generation of Palestinians will have even more anger, hostility, and hatred for the Israeli state. Now, here at Press for Truth, we don't support either side of this conflict, but we're not accepting that Israel can do no wrong propaganda that the rest of the Canadian media have taken. It would be nice if both Israeli and Palestinian militants ceased fire and worked out a peace agreement, but until that happens, if that happens, PFT refuses to ignore Israelis' war crimes. But even calling this a war is up for debate because the bombardment of Gaza is not about destroying Hamas, and it is certainly not about achieving peace in the Middle East. The Israeli decision to rain death and destruction on Gaza, to use lethal weapons of the modern battlefield on a largely defenseless civilian population, is the final phase in a decades-long campaign to ethnically cleanse Palestinians. Israel uses sophisticated attack jets and naval vessels to bomb densely crowded refugee camps, schools, apartment blocks, mosques, and slums, to attack a population that has no air force, no air defense, no navy, no heavy weapons, no artillery units, no mechanized armor, no command and control, no army. And they call this a war. Ladies and gentlemen, this isn't a war. This is murder. So we're going to continue to track this ongoing conflict, folks. So please stay tuned to Press for Truth. We're going to have a lot more videos coming out in the next week and articles that we've been working on all week. So once again, I want to thank you for tuning in to pressfortruth.ca.